What's up, everyone? Josh Hennig here on my YouTube channel. I have not done one of these Marvel review videos in a while. One, because we haven't had a Marvel movie since Deadpool and Wolverine last summer. And two, because I've just been incredibly busy at work. So I wanted to take a couple minutes here to do a video where I dispel some of the there is a lot of misinformation out there about Captain America Brave New World, the movie, how it was developed, its themes and elements, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I want to take some time to, one, dispel the misinformation. Two, explain to you what the movie is really about. And number three, explain how this is actually a bridge movie leading up to what is to come with the Marvel properties. So, first of all, I appreciate all of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends. The more feedback I get from these kind of videos gives me some insight into what people like you want to see here on my YouTube channel. So, two warnings here. Number one, this review will have spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, you're not looking for spoilers, this isn't the video for you. Number two, if you are someone who's easily offended, if you are somebody who has people that you like to listen to on either side of the political aisle who present to you a perspective and a worldview that is comfortable for you, then again, this is not the video for you, because I am going to mess with some sacred cows here, okay? So, at the time of me making this video, Captain America Brave New World has passed the $100 million domestic box office number. And the reason why I am focusing on the domestic box office is because if you have watched me here on my YouTube channel or listened to my podcast, the Mutant Blitz podcast, you know that the domestic box office gross is a much better measurement of a movie's popularity than the international number, because the international numbers can be manipulated a little bit, and some of that stuff is not always based on the same dollars and cents that in America. And I'm not going to get into, global economics here, okay? But so for the purpose of this conversation, when a movie passes the $100 million box office domestically, it is a sign within the first several days the movie is doing well and will continue to do well. And that is significant because coming into the release of this movie, there was a lot of politically and social activist agendas being driven about this movie. And the reason why it's important to talk about it here is because I'm going to tell you guys stuff that other people will not talk about. And I want to start with the misinformation. This movie was not made for DEI purposes. This movie was not a woke film. This movie was not made to make Captain America black, okay? And the problem is that when you have individuals, and I'm going to name them, okay? Clay Travis of Outkick, for example, or a Jason Whitlock from The Blaze, or if you go to the other side of the aisle, okay, a Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, or someone who's non-political but is supposed to be a objective observer in the entertainment space, a Matt Singer from Screen Crush. And I purposely named those 5 individuals because they all represent different areas of the mediaverse, I'll call it, who are supposed to be, or at least they claim to be, objective arbiters of truth and blah, blah, blah. And the reality is, for as much as you or I may agree with some of the things that all 5 of those people and others say, the truth is that this movie, if you know anything about Marvel Comics, if you know anything about what's going on with Marvel Studios, Disney's ownership of them, so on and so forth, you would know that Anthony Mackie, despite the comments made by him, is not anti-American. This film is not anti-American ideals, okay? This movie has nothing to do with trying to promote some American exceptionalist agenda. There's all kinds of accusations going on out there. So here's what the movie actually is. This movie, for all intents and purposes, is about 2 years late. See, what a lot of the people out there don't want to tell you is that what is going on in Marvel is a domino effect of an issue that came up in the last several years. So let's backtrack and explain how we got to this point where you have all these people like your Blaze, Outkick, OANs, your MSNBCs, your CNNs, your Screen Crushes, your Deadlines, Variety Magazine, why all these people seem to be putting out these different narratives about this movie. So we have to go back. When the COVID lockdowns happened, all production of the movie industry was shut down. This came on the heels of Disney then CEO Bob Chapek releasing a statement to shareholders about their plans for the rollout of Disney Plus. So COVID basically hit a year after the initial rollout for the streaming platforms. And this streaming information had to do with Disney, properties such as Marvel Studios, has to do with Star Wars, has to do with Pixar, a lot of different properties. They had an overly ambitious plan that ended up blowing up in their faces, which is why Bob Chapek got fired, which is they took the position of quantity over quality. And anytime you want to put quantity over quality, you are going to have a lot of misses, right? To use the baseball analogy, you're swinging and missing more often than you're making contact. So that's why, for example, to just stick with Marvel here, a movie like Shang-Chi was so well done and well received, and then a movie like Eternals frankly didn't make any sense for the bigger picture. Because Marvel was in this phase where it was all about, we need content, we need to pump out content. And so what happened is behind the scenes, one of the big three executives at Marvel Studios used this oversaturation of content to create an opportunity for them to drive home their own agendas. Victoria Alonso, who was one of the original three executives of Marvel Studios, her role has always been post-production. So here's how it breaks down. Big three at Marvel Studios for roughly 18 years. Okay, we'll just stick with that time frame because it's easier to trace it. Was Kevin Feige, he's the top of the ladder. And then he was working with Victoria Alonso and Louis Esposito. Victoria Alonso's job was post-production. She oversaw a lot of the pre-production development for the special effects. She oversaw the merger of what is filmed and the special effects that end up in the property. And one of the things that Marvel does that a lot of studios don't do, and it's been controversial over the years, is Marvel actually does some of their post-production before they actually start filming. And what they do is they do these pre-visualizations. They call them previs, where they basically start developing parts of the story before it's actually ever filmed or written. So because they're doing it that way, there's a lot of say that Victoria Alonso had in the production and the development process of a lot of stories. Kevin Feige's job was more of the pre-production, setup, logistics. Louis Esposito was more of like a quality control executive. He's kind of the guy that makes sure that during the process of filming, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. And the reason why this is significant is because, for those who don't know, Victoria Alonso is a member of the LBGQ plus community. Okay, to be perfectly clear, I'm only quoting from reporting and her own interviews. So if I present this properly or incorrectly mispresent this, I don't really care. If I offend somebody's political views, get over yourself. Okay, we're all grown ups here. She has said in interviews that it was very important for her to have a say at Marvel Studios because she wanted to be a part of a world where girls who grew up like she did would have a say in the content that is being putting out there. And what she means is young women who grew up who were lesbian, who were homosexual. And so over time, she started basically pushing more of her own personal agenda elements into films. For example, the Eternals movie that was not shown in multiple countries because of the homosexual relationship between two characters in the film. Well, there's a lot of countries around the world that they basically treat homosexuality as evil, okay? And so Arab, Muslim countries, China, other places of the world, they basically would not let Eternals and other films of Marvel be shown there. Now, this obviously hurt Marvel's bottom line because China is one of the bigger, larger demographic areas, which is ironic because China is okay with Captain America, First Avenger, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and presenting the idea that this American-born, bred hero is going to save the world from an alien invasion is borderline hilarious that China will allow that in there, but if two men are kissing on screen, we can't show that in China. So read into that what you will. That's a conversation for another day. But over time, her influence became greater and greater because Kevin Feige was overwhelmed and Louis Esposito was staying in his lane. Well, when they fired Bob Chapek and Bob Iger came on board with Disney, it was very controversial. And there was a lot of accusations that Disney was going all woke. You know, if you go woke, you go broke. And all that kind of narrative out there. Well, the problem is that Bob Iger realized that some of those accusations were accurate. How were they accurate? Because of Victoria Alonso and her meddling and her having an overreach in the development and the creative process. That's why, for example, if you look at the credits for some of these Marvel properties, they have like 5, 6, 7, 8 writers. Because what's happening is Marvel would hand the script off to one person, and they bring in another person for a rewrite, and another, like the DJ Khaled gif, and another one, and another one. So Victoria was so intent on using different properties to execute some of her personal and political agendas. And she was doing it without consulting anyone else. So some of that content that was being shoved into these properties was appearing at the end of the process. So Kevin Feige, Louis Esposito, Marvel Studios, management, quality control, we'll call it, had no say in the process. So now bring it all back. Victoria Alonso, roughly 18 months ago, was fired unceremoniously by Marvel for basically overstepping. They exercised a clause in her contract that said that she was acting unilaterally. She tried to sue them for it. She lost the lawsuit. They basically paid her half of her go-away money because they basically accused her of damaging the brand. Okay, there's a lot of legalese that goes into it. Again, not for this conversation. So let's bring it back to Captain America New World. Captain America New World is only the second Marvel movie in the post-Victoria Alonso era. But the difference between Captain America Brave New World and Deadpool and Wolverine, which came out this past summer, was that this was the first Marvel movie with multiple reshoots that did not involve any of Victoria Alonso's oversight. You see, when Deadpool and Wolverine was filmed and produced, it was completely separate from anything involving Victoria Alonso's pre-viz department, pre-visualization. They actually had a script and half the movie already developed for Captain America Brave New World, and they had to undo half of it. Which is why when you watch the movie, there are different parts that look a little bit like they were shot with different cameras from different angles, maybe a different studio, maybe a different editor, right? Again, does it make the movie any less good? No, the movie is still a good movie. But you can see, if you're paying attention with a very close editorial eye, myself as someone who has done some video editing and production, I can tell some of the variables. The movie was not originally called Brave New World. The original name of the movie was Captain America New World Order. Well, in the desire of Marvel to distance themselves from the Victoria Alonso era, they changed the name of the film. They brought in new script writers to clean up some of the elements of the film. And because Harrison Ford was a part of the film, they gave Harrison Ford a little more creative voice in some of the movie's content. And what happened was, for those who don't know, in today's world, there are clauses in actors' contracts that allow them to have a say in some of the creative direction of a project. For example, Denzel Washington has a very large say in the creative direction of all projects he's involved in. Harrison Ford has a pretty significant say in the creative direction of his projects. Anthony Mackie has some say. Robert Downey Jr. had a lot of say in the movies he has been in the Marvel, so on and so forth. But the problem is because Marvel already created an environmental dynamic where the perception of them is that they might have been creating content that was controversial and unpopular, or something that is distasteful for people of the conservative and an evangelical right persuasion. It has become easy target practice for people such as Outkick's Clay Travis, Jason Whitlock of The Blaze, people on OAN, some Fox News types, for them to come out and basically try to paint Marvel and Disney as like the villain, the bad guy. Look at these crazy woke people, right? And then they make crazy comments like, Captain America, why is he black? Why are they making Captain America black? Without understanding comic book history. That the reality is that Captain America is actually a title, and that there have been multiple men since the character was first created by Jack Kirby around 1940. Okay? We're talking about a character that was originally created during World War II. Keep that in mind. The character has evolved, multiple story arcs. Steve Rogers has given up the mantle. He's died. He's been brought back to life. He's handed the mantle off. The mantle has been taken from him. I mean, you're talking about 80 years of comic book history here that we're drawing from. Whether you agree or disagree with some of that history, that's a conversation that we can have, but not for this film. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has attempted to follow a lot of the concepts and story elements of the comics. One of those story elements is when Steve Rogers gets old and he hands the Captain America mantle off to Sam Wilson. Sam Wilson has been one of his best friends in the comics since the 1970s. Now, the good news is Marvel Studios has not followed the literal story arcs from the comics, because, let's be realistic, the way Captain America loses his super soldier serum, Steve Rogers I should say, in the comics, and the way Sam Wilson becomes best friends with Steve Rogers, if you made those in the movies, nobody is watching them. I don't even know if I'm watching them, and I am a comic book geek, because some of the concepts they use in the comics were just really weird, okay? The comics were really weird in the 70s. Let's just put it that way. 70s and 90s were not exactly the best times for comic books. And I'll just... So, they were trying to follow a story arc because Chris Evans' contract for playing Steve Rogers was expiring. Excuse me. And the original intent of the multiverse saga, which we are currently in, the first couple phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the Infinity Saga, of building up to Thanos and the Infinity Stones, and that showdown. This saga was meant to bridge the gap between the first 10 years of Marvel Studios, actually first 15 years of Marvel Studios movies, and the eventual goal of Kevin Feige, which is to bring all Marvel characters under the same roof. The problem is that when you bring too many cooks into the kitchen, you are not any more productive at making the meal. You just make things more complicated, and it gets messy, and a lot of egos get involved. So now Marvel is trying to clean up, not have so many cooks in the kitchen, trying to whittle down this whole story arc, this overall narrative. So they need movies that are going to be bridges from point A to point B. This movie is one of those bridges. It's not that Marvel says we want a black Captain America. It's that Sam Wilson is a character that has been in comics and in these movies for a long time, and he's part of a greater story that's being told. That being, the man who is a hero does not need to be a literal superhuman. And throughout the movie, he has this whole conflict in Captain America Brave New World, as he did in the TV show. Do I deserve the mantle? Should I be Captain America? Should I have taken the super soldier serum? What made Steve Rogers special? Etc., etc. And the problem is that instead of people watching the movie and listening to the overarching story, which is the overarching deeper story, is that the movie basically tells the audience that doing the right thing is more important than always following orders, right? There's multiple times in the movie where Sam Wilson is told, do this or do that. He doesn't listen. Just like Steve Rogers in the comics and in the movies didn't always listen to the government dictators telling them what to do. Again, you would think the anti-establishment types would latch on to this and love to talk about this, but again, they don't want to tell you that because it flies in the face of their agendas. They would rather create controversy and give hot takes and not tell you these things. Sam Wilson is an individual who wants to work with people, not just shoot up the place and ask questions later. When he's told to wait, he says, I can't wait because there are hostages. I don't want people to get killed. Disobeys a direct order. The President of the United States, played by Harrison Ford, tells him, stay out of this investigation. He doesn't listen. It's a good thing he doesn't listen because he uncovers some very important information in the movie that reveals why what is happening in the movie and what has actually happened for the last 20 years of Marvel movies is happening. Because you find out that a character from the Incredible Hulk movie that was released in 2008 has been orchestrating some of the events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe behind the scenes. And a movie creates a great level of clarity so you understand, well, now it makes sense why Zemo did what he did in Captain America Civil War and how he got that information. Now it makes sense why Ross was at the ready with the Sokovia Accords, right? Now it makes sense why it was orchestrated, okay, I'm going to use that word purposely, orchestrated for certain heroes to be portrayed as bad guys in the MCU when they're actually the good guys. And it actually validates a lot of what Steve Rogers said in different movies, even more so, because part of the narrative of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been doing the right thing is not always popular, and not everyone's going to like you for it, and they're going to call you bad names and portray you in a negative way, which is ironic because it's kind of a secularized version of something that the Bible says when Jesus said that basically when Jesus tells his disciples you are to be in the world and not of it, and people are going to hate you and revile you and persecute you for my name's sake, not everyone's going to like you. This is a secularized version of that. Again, you would think that the religious conservatives and all those people would love these concepts, but again, they're too busy telling you that, woke is broke and let me make some headlines and some hot takes for my social media platform because clicks are more important than the truth. Now, is the movie perfect? Absolutely not. Okay? They did not do a good job with their overall exposition and storytelling of fleshing out the intentions of Samuel Stearns until basically the end of the movie. Now, if you want to say that they were giving the audience little breadcrumbs along the way, sure. But one of the accusations that has been made by people like Matt Singer of Screen Crush and other people is that movies like this have trouble standing on their own because of the fact that these movies need to be seen as part of a greater story arc. And if you haven't watched movie A and B or show A and then movie B, you don't understand what you're seeing in the movie theater. And I understand where they're coming from because, yes, there is an element of you want the movie to stand on its own 2 feet. You don't want it to be hyper-dependent on other projects. But again, if you read comic books and you understand the overarching elements that go into this storytelling, okay, if you are somebody who is a Star Wars fan, you are someone who is a Lord of the Rings fan, a Harry Potter fan, right? You understand that all of these characters, like the Marvel characters, are based on fictional characters that were created not for movies. So if you read all of C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, you have a bigger and better and more full picture of why the first 3 books have any substance and value beyond the initial impression that you have. Well, why would you only go see Captain America Brave New World and not see the other properties if you understand that these movies and these stories are part of a larger universe? Now, if you want to criticize, why didn't you guys explain certain elements, we can have that conversation. But again, you have people like Matt Singer of Screen Crush who love to just be critical and negative, for the sake of being critical and negative, because they like to complain. So, I am going to give you guys a quick explanation of the movie now, so you understand what's going on. And what's going on is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this multiverse saga they're calling it, is building up toward a huge showdown that involves characters from multiple universes all coming together to deal with a ultimate bad guy. They have announced that bad guy is going to be Doctor Doom. But it's going to be a variant of Doctor Doom. It's not going to be the original Doctor Doom, in part because they are leaning into this idea that they are going to use the end of the multiverse saga as a soft reset for all of the Marvel movies, because Marvel realizes that these actors and actresses can't play these characters forever. And at some point, they might need to be recast. And they realized that because one of the sad stories of the COVID-19 pandemic was the passing of Chadwick Boseman. Marvel was positioning Chadwick Boseman to be one of the major faces of the MCU after Avengers Endgame. Well, the guy passed away. Nothing you could do about that in real life. So they had to change a lot of their plans. And there was a lot of pushback on, well, who's the next Black Panther, right? And you had that old political issue because Letitia Wright is a very public Christian. She is someone who refused to take any of the COVID shots or any of the COVID medications, and she was painted as a pariah. So there's a lot of pushback on her being one of the faces of Marvel moving forward. And because Victoria Alonso was still involved in the company, she was one of those voices inside the company that was against any of that stuff, of her being a face. So instead of them recasting Chadwick Boseman, they said, you know what, maybe we need a little more time and distance. Maybe we need to be a little less about how much money can we make and more about telling a good story. And that's why Black Panther Wakanda Forever, in spite of the anti-Letitia Wright people, ended up being one of the most profitable Marvel movies of the last 5 years. Why? Because it was, first, a well-done movie. Number two, it was well constructed, it was well presented. And number three, the people who went and saw the movie were able to get online and talk to their friends and say, this movie is not what you think. Unlike the Eternals, where we were told by the experts, quote unquote, how great the movie was, and then you go and see the movie and you're like, yeah, that movie was lacking in a lot of areas. That was not your best foot forward, Marvel. So, bring it back to the present. Speaking of the Eternals, this movie, Captain America Brave New World, does a good job at cleaning up that plot line. How on earth is there an Eternal just sitting in the ocean and no one's doing anything about it? They deal with that issue, right? They lay the groundwork for the X-Men in this movie because they introduced the compound adamantium. For those who don't know, adamantium is the unbreakable metal that is all along Wolverine's skeleton. So they're laying the groundwork for Wolverine coming into the MCU, right? They also set up a world where the President of the United States goes to Sam Wilson and says, you need to reorganize the Avengers. And you have that whole dynamic of, should Sam Wilson be the leader of the Avengers? Sam Wilson being conflicted about that. Am I the best guy to be the leader? All the, human questions that go along with it. And they do a good job of fleshing that out. And I love the narrative, how the movie plays out, how Steve Rogers, Captain America, was someone to be admired, someone that you look up to, and he's almost like this, demigod level character. That's he's perfect, he's untouchable, he's amazing. Whereas Sam Wilson is an exceptionally moral human being, and that's someone that people aspire to. That they don't admire him, they aspire to be him because he's someone that's more attainable. And they played around with that theme in the movie, and I thought that was fun. Now, of course, could we have had more of an explanation of why they know so much about the Celestial in the ocean? Could they have done a better explanation of why they named it adamantium? Could they have done a better explanation of how Harrison Ford's character of Thaddeus Ross became president? Could they have done a better job at explaining why he needed special pills from Dr. Stearns to deal with his heart condition so he wouldn't die? Again, I can give you a list of things they could have done better in this movie. And I'm sure part of the reason why it didn't do so well is because when you have basically 8 different writers on the script in the pre-filming and post-production of the project, something is going to get lost in translation. Does that make it a bad movie? No. Does that make it woke? No. Does that make it stupid? No. Does that make it, how dare they have an American save the day again? I think you know the answer to that. And see, the problem is all of these people who are critical have these very large platforms. And because they have very large platforms, people take what they say as gospel, ignoring the fact that in the real gospel, okay, if you claim to be a Christian, right, if you're someone who says you believe in the Bible, Jesus in the Bible talks about you don't trust men, you trust God. And the problem is we live in a world where there's a lot of people who idolize humans, and they only respect God when he fits into the narrative of their natural beliefs and conversation. So when the Bible says the tradition of men make the word of God void and of no effect, obviously I'm not quoting the verse exactly. Preface that for those of people that are going to be mad at me because I'm not quoting the Bible literally. The point being that these people claim that they know things. They really don't know anything. And I'm not the expert either. I'm just here to clear things up. Now, what could the movie have done better? As I said, they could have done a better job with the exposition. They could have done a better job explaining some of the points of reference. And obviously, there's a group of people out there who, like myself, watched The Incredible Hulk in 2008. But 2008 was a long time ago. So could they have done a better job at explaining why that movie even mattered? Why some of these story elements even matter? Absolutely, they could have. By the way, something else they could have done a better job is the character of Sabra. Okay, for those who don't know, the first Jewish superhero in Marvel Comics, which was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby over 50 years ago, Ruth is introduced in the movie, and she basically has one scene where she gets to be a superhero. The rest of the movie, she's the national security consultant, advisor, most trusted person for the president. She's portrayed in a way that basically she's there more for her brain than her abilities. I'm sure somebody has a problem with that as well. I would have liked to see her character be fleshed out a little bit more because in the comics she's actually a really cool character. She is somebody who has Black Widow training, like, you know, Natasha Romanoff and Elena Belova, who you've seen in the movies. But she also has Israeli Mossad training. And I'm sure that there was a person or two involved in the script writing and the pre and post editing who said maybe we shouldn't emphasize her her Mossad background and her Israeli connections as much because of the conflict going on the Gaza Strip. I'm sure there's some politically correct individual that edited things out. So if you want to blame them for that, I can roll with that. I personally like to see more of her character and more fleshing out of a character that's actually a pretty cool character in the comics. A character that has had some very good stories and has been associated with Sam Wilson in the comics and has worked with him and Bucky Barnes in the comics. I would have liked an explanation for why Bucky Barnes is running for Congress. Why is a 110-year-old super soldier who was brainwashed by Hydra for 70 of the last 110 years all of a sudden now been cleared and he's gone from being an Avenger to now running for Congress? I would have liked an explanation for that. But do any of these questions that I have make the movie bad? No. Does it make it woke? Does it make it dumb? Does it make it, Django nationalism? No, and no, and no. And I'm sure there's some people like the MSNBC people of the world, who might not like the fact that an American superhero is out there saving Japan and going into Mexico without clearance to save a bunch of hostages, right? I'm sure there's somebody somewhere out there who looks at the movie and says, see, this is America overstepping their boundaries because, see, they're condoning it in this movie, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of different people who might take, the whole, look at this really old guy becoming president. We have a problem in this country with old people only getting elected to office. I'm sure there's a lot of exposition narratives that can be extrapolated from this movie, but I'm not here for that. Okay, I'm here to give it to you straight, guys. And this movie, for the flaws that it does have, overall is a good movie. And it has a good underlying message. And it does so without any unnecessary violence. The movie is not violent for violence sake. One of the criticisms of Deadpool and Wolverine is that that movie is excessive on the stylized violence, right? And it's part of the running joke in Deadpool and Wolverine is the unnecessary violence. This movie stays away from that. This movie stays more grounded. This movie stays away from the sci-fi elements of the other movies. It tries to reach back in time to the Captain America Winter Soldier movie and create a more, political thriller that is set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, similar to what Winter Soldier did. That movie did. What was that? 10 years ago. So I think they did a good job with that. There's a little bit of Harrison Ford maybe having a little extra fun, shall I say, praying the president. Leaning into his, giving you a bit of a recall of Air Force One, that movie. There's a little bit going on of you feel maybe there's a little bit of a, for those who have seen the Manchurian Candidate movie, there's a little bit of that vibe going on here. There's a little bit of an overall deeper conspiracy going on here. And again, if you're willing to go into the movie, to watch the movie for what it is, all of these elements are fun. They're fine. These movies are not meant to be hyper serious, okay? These movies are meant to entertain. And I think at the end of the day, the movie did a good job. Now, what is it setting up? It's setting up the fact that Sam Wilson is going to reorganize the Avengers. Who is going to be the new Avengers? Why do you need a new Avengers? Well, because there's an oncoming threat. And the threat, as they mentioned in Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, which is, again, a movie that's a few years old now, right? That was 2022 when that movie came out. Again, this movie, Captain America Brave New World, is 2 years late. We are delayed on the rollout of these projects. There's way too much time in between these movies. People are forgetting some of the storylines here, right? Again, part of it's Victoria Alonso's fault. They had to basically get rid of her, purge some of the elements she was involved with, and fix things. So, if you want to give Marvel credit for not just letting her keep having carte blanche, doing whatever she wants, and trying to make a better product, you can give them credit for that. If you want to give Marvel criticism for letting her do whatever she wanted for too long, you can give Marvel criticism for that, right? Is Disney's Bob Iger maybe a little bit more concerned about making the company money than putting out the best product at times? Of course they are, right? I mean, did anybody really want a second Mona movie? I know somebody's going to be mad at me for saying that, but I'm saying it, okay? Did we really need some of the Disney movies that have come out in the last couple of years? Of course not, okay? Was anybody asking for a Mufasa movie? No. Okay? Does it make these movies horrible? Absolutely not. Disney is in the money-making business. And they own Marvel Studios. So Marvel Studios, in turn, is also in the money-making business. And as soon as they realized that Victoria Alonso was making life difficult for them, they scrapped her and they moved on. Does that make every project Marvel does going forward great or good? Not necessarily, but I think it shows they're going in the right direction. And this movie is the second movie that shows that they are putting the right foot forward to move in that direction. So, who are the new Avengers going to be? Well, they already suggested a couple of the ideas. Sam Wilson obviously is going to be the leader as Captain America. You're probably going to have Scott Lang's Ant-Man played by Paul Rudd. He'll be a part of it. He was name dropped a couple times in this movie. I'm assuming whoever doesn't die in the Thunderbolts movie will be a part of the team. The reason I say that is because, for those who don't know, the next Marvel movie coming out is Thunderbolts in a few months. And it has been heavily suggested, I'll call it, that a couple of the characters are going to die saving the world in that movie. So, my working assumption is whoever doesn't die in that movie will be an Avenger on Sam Wilson's team. And then probably Shang-Chi, because Simu Liu has a contract that's written for him to be in Avengers movies. And part of his contract is he has, I think it's 5 movies left on his contract. I double check what the exact details are. But so he'll be an Avenger coming up. We are going to say that Shuri's Black Panther is going to be. I know that she has, I believe it's 2 movies left on her contract, so they got to put her somewhere. Let her be an Avenger. Let her help save the world, right? Black Panther was one of the Avengers in the 1960s and 70s. They didn't get to do it with Chadwick Boseman. They can now do it with Shuri, right? And there's a couple other characters who might partake in an Avengers movie. I'm going to go off the working assumption that the Young Avengers will not be a part of the new Avengers team. So characters like Kate Bishop, Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel, a lot of those specific characters are not going to be part of the main Avengers team because they're going to be part of another story arc. So, and again, you're building up to a big reveal. What is the big reveal? Number one, that Doctor Doom from another universe is going to basically be the big boss bad guy in the next arc of the Avengers saga, which is why there's two Avengers movies coming up. But also, he is going to be like the secondary bad guy because the Avengers are going to gather to deal with incursions and possibly deal with Galactus and deal with all kinds of other characters that are coming along, And, the idea is going to be originally Doctor Doom is going to be viewed initially as a hero, and then you're going to find out that he's a villain, and they have to work together to deal with the villain, right? Again, classic comic hero story stuff. It's nothing hyper deep. But again, this movie is a bridge because you have three Marvel movies coming out this year. This was the first of the three. And anyone who has been following this news, like myself, anyone who read the MCU book, breaking down all the dirty secrets of the Marvel Studios history, we all knew that this movie, Captain America Brave New World, was going to be the third best of the three Marvel movies this year. Not because it's a bad movie, but because, one, when you have 8 writers involved in a movie, too many cooks in the kitchen, and number two, the other movies are much more concise and clean when it comes to the direction of the movie and the characters and how they relate to the larger picture. Frankly, you could make the argument that the Fantastic Four movie coming out this summer will be the best Marvel movie of the year. But again, that's the third movie. You still have another movie coming out, as well as other projects in the meantime. So, I would always caution people, think for yourself, do your own research. If you don't want to do your own research, ask someone like myself who is an unbiased observer. For as much as I love Marvel Comics and I'm a fan of these characters in the studio, I will be critical. And I'll tell you, some of these movies have problems. Some of these movies have issues. There are, overarching, clean up in aisle 12 vibes going on with some of this stuff, right? But I will say that a lot of the misinformation out there saying that this is, this movie, as it's been criticized by people on the right and left wing of the political divide and people in the entertainment industry who have tried to paint this movie as having all kinds of problems. A lot of those people are putting out misinformation out there. So I want to take some time to have that conversation here. If you like these kind of conversations, if you like these deeper dives, I would love to do more of them here on my YouTube channel. So if you like what we're doing here, like, subscribe, share, comment below. Hit me up at Josh Hennig on the Twitter X platform, Joshua S. Hennig on Instagram. And if this is a topic which I'm interested in, I'm very passionate about, I have a lot of thoughts on these things, we can do more of these sit-down conversations about the Marvel projects like I used to do very frequently with the Mutant Blitz podcast. So thank you for taking time to watch. I appreciate all of you tuning in. And I will catch you next time right here on my YouTube channel at Josh Hennig. Take care, everyone.